Olá, estamos no Rio Innovation Week e agora eu converso com Eric Ries, o autor do clássico The Lean Startup. Eric, it's very good to have you here.
Thank you.
So, my first question is about how things are valid, given all the change that the world has, been pressured to change and to survive. And what can we consider valid since the publication, and what has changed?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, thank you for welcoming me. I've had a wonderful time so far, and it's always wonderful to be in Brazil. I feel so warmly welcome. So,
good to hear that.
Thank you. Yes, it's great. So Lean Startup, if you can believe it, was published in 2011. So the world is very different from 2011. We had a pandemic. The global situation is very different. We've had economic cycles up and down since then. And I've always believed that in order for something to be universal or timeless, or even just to last more than 1 quarter, 1 year, 1 decade, you have to go to the principles that underlie the tactics, that underlie the activities. So when Lean Startup first came out, it was the early days still of the Web 2.0, social startups, social media, SaaS software. So people were very focused on the tactics, the split testing and continuous deployment and using search engine marketing to test ideas. I mean, I could go back. It's hard to even remember how today those things are so obvious and old, but at the time they were new and exciting. And I always told people, look, if you get focused on those things can become obsolete. And we didn't know about AI, we didn't know about Bitcoin, we didn't know so many things we didn't know about at that time, right? So you have to go underneath. Underneath what's true, the fundamental truth of all startups is about uncertainty. It's never going to change. The fact that human knowledge and cognition is limited, so we can't predict the future, that's never going to change. And the difficulty of figuring out what to build. You can't just ask people what they want, you have to find some other way to discover, like a scientist, what they actually want. So I think those are the universal truths that are true, but now the tools we have at our disposal are so much better, not just AI, not just AWS and the cloud and and mobile technology. I mean, I could go on and on about all the things that have made possible, and we have before we even get to additive manufacturing or the ability to make nuclear power plants at a lower cost than ever before. So we have tremendous capability improvement, which means more competition, which means more ambitious startups, but also means more disruption, more chaos, more uncertainty. It's a very different world than 2011.
Yeah, very different. But there is one thing that I don't know if it is the same thing, or if we have been accelerating. That is the startup culture.
Yes.
So it seems like everybody wants to have their own startup.
Yeah.
Why do you think the startup culture becomes so pervasive, and what's the risks of it?
Well, there's a good part and there's a dark. Anything in life, you have the light and the dark always together. The good thing is that being an entrepreneur is awesome. I mean, in our grandparents' time, the vast majority of people who wanted to make a living had to work in the context of some very hierarchical organization where they were just a small cog in a large machine. And there are people that like that kind of work and seek out stability. Okay. But if you were a maverick, if you were creative, if you want to do something different, it was very difficult. If you read read the biographies of the early 20th century entrepreneurs, and the thing that always strikes me as incredible about that time is almost every single one of them, Henry Ford, you pick your name, they were from a wealthy family, they had wealthy relatives who could finance there was no system, there was no career for entrepreneurship. And now that we've made that more democratically available, not perfectly, we have a lot of bias and problems still to solve, but much more so than 100 years ago, that represents tremendous progress. The light. What's the dark side of it? Entrepreneurship is horrible. It's a very difficult job. There's very few people, I think about like super elite athletes or people that, people who are on the front lines of a conflict, or nurses, teachers who are working in their difficult conditions. Like, there are these really hard jobs in the world, and entrepreneurship is one of them. It's hard for your psyche. It's, it's psychologically damaging. It has these downsides. So people who glamorize it, I think, are doing everybody a disservice. We have to make clear that on the one hand, entrepreneurship is one of the greatest ways in the world to make change, and positive change if you want to. Nothing to take anything away from being an activist or a politician or to start a nonprofit. Those are all admirable pursuits. But entrepreneurship is right up there as a way to really make consequential change. But it's only for people who really feel called to do that for some higher purpose. I think people who go into entrepreneurship just to make money are in for a very rude awakening.
One of the things of this dark side is discipline.
Yes.
So, dark side in terms of it is hard to have this discipline to make everything happen and to deal with this amount of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And at MIT, at the MIT First Center of Entrepreneurship, we have Bill Wallet with another classic book that it is Disciplined Entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks a lot about the way entrepreneurs do things and the way successful and extremely successful entrepreneurs do and deal with all the aspects of being an entrepreneur. How do you see discipline in the whole landscape of lean startup?
I love that question because from the outside, entrepreneurs look like they're crazy. Pick your favorite entrepreneur. You think, is he brilliant or does he have a mental illness? It's often not sure.
Yeah, because you have the stereotype of an extremely creative and crazy dogs.
It's a little bit crazy, and there's a truth to that it looks like people who try to emulate Steve Jobs or whoever. I was a famous entrepreneur in California who used to put on the black turtleneck just like he put on the black turtleneck, as if wearing his same clothes would make you like him. So we have to be careful we don't emulate the surface characteristics. My experience is that there is a method to the madness. When people hear discipline, they sometimes think that means process, routine, bureaucracy. And a lot of entrepreneurs say, no, we don't use a process. But that's because they're used to the hierarchical process where you have to know what you're going to do in advance. When we understand that entrepreneurial management is its own discipline, its own best practice, and as you master it, you realize that the things we think of as discipline when it comes to general management are different. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. And so the entrepreneurial discipline, I think it will be a big improvement when people start to see that as a field of its own, a field of study, worthy of study, a management science, distinct from what's come before. And then we can start to think about how do you improve as an entrepreneur and why does that look different than, for example, success as a general manager.
Another thing that is different from 2011 is the importance of ambidexterity and the startup idea in large corporations.
Yes.
So we didn't talk too much about this 10, 15 years ago.
No.
But now it seems that it is very important.
Yes.
And I think that companies that are struggling to become relevant or to stay relevant
Absolutely.
in those markets, they have to be looking at corporate venture capital or open innovation or establishing their own startups.
Yeah.
How do you see these concepts of the book in 2011 linking to the needs of innovation in large corporations?
Yeah. I actually wrote a whole book about it called The Startup Way, in which I tried to elaborate the things that companies say they want. They say they want risk-taking and innovation, and they want the growth, fundamentally the growth that innovation can provide, the relevancy, as you said. They want those things, but they don't want to do the work to put the preconditions in place to make it happen. And so I tried to work out a theory about how that could be done differently, and I've been very honored to put that into practice in some of the world's largest companies. The problem is twofold. One, people pay lip service to corporate innovation, but they don't make the deep systemic change that it requires. And we're watching it play out now with AI. It's fascinating. It's like Back to the Future. I know so many corporate innovation people who've been laid off, and the people that replace them are AI people. So everyone's rebranding their corporate innovation to AI, and they're still doing AI like we used to do innovation 15 years ago. Big budgets. I was talking to a company the other day. They spent $18 million or something, and 2 years to train an AI model to roll out to their customer service reps to improve their productivity. And you'll be shocked. Guess what happened? They didn't talk to any customer service reps, of course, so by the time they rolled it out, when they finally rolled it out, customer service reps wouldn't use it. And they're like, oh, there's something wrong with our customer service reps. Well, maybe. Or maybe you forgot to test your assumptions. So I developed this podcast we call Lean AI, where we're just interviewing people who are doing AI in corporate settings. And what's fascinating is the best practices for using AI, it goes to the principles. The principles are the same as they've ever been, but people think because the technology has changed, now we can go back to the old way, and they're having a terrible time. The ratio of whiz-bang demos, cool concepts, to deployed products is as bad as I've ever seen it. And so I think there's going to be a massive reckoning in corporate settings to try to figure out how do we reinvigorate these AI programs to make them actually useful to our employees and to our customers.
Can we expect a lean AI book?
Well, we'll start with just the playbook. People need to buy a book. It's actually very simple, but they can check it out. They go to leanstartup.co. We have all the information there.
So one last question.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think that are the most important to deal with innovation, especially for large corporations, is the short-term thinking.
Yes.
I know that is a problem for startups, but it's a huge problem.
Huge problem. Oh my goodness.
For large corporations. And now we have long-term stock exchange. I'd like to ask you to elaborate about the needs and what are the goals with it.
Thank you for asking me about that. Yeah, if you actually read The Lean Startup, in 2011 I published the book. And at the very end of the book, very few people read the whole book. It's okay. But if you go all the way to the very end.
One of them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And
yeah.
as I told you, I love it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. If you read all the way to the end, almost the last page, I suggest future directions for the startup movement. And one of the things I suggest, somebody should really build a long-term stock exchange, because a lot of the short-term behaviors that we see come from bad incentives. Where do the incentives come from? They come from investors, but not from long-term investors, from the short-term traders and the intermediaries that come to dominate our stock markets. A problem all over the world, but especially bad in the US. So I thought, oh, well, let's get a long-term stock exchange. Let's have an exchange where the very best companies, the ones that think long-term, and the investors that think long-term can come together to transact and not be forced into all this short-term pressure nonsense that characterizes our current markets. I said someone should build it. Not me. I thought, well, I put it out there, somebody will build it. Now, here's the funny thing. If you go back and make a chart of every random idea that I said somebody should do from Lean Startup, there's a book is full of ideas, and every single one, somebody went and did it, except for one. No one ever wanted to do the stock exchange, so I said, okay, I'll do it.
So yeah. Just to make 100% of ideas implemented.
Just to get as a completionist, yeah. And I've been working on it for almost 10 years now. People said that it could never happen. First of all, you could never get the regulatory approval to operate a new exchange with new rules. It hasn't happened in the US since the creation of NASDAQ in the 70s, long time. People said even if you could get it approved, you could never get people to trade on the exchange, and you could never get companies to list on the exchange. But in the years since we've gotten the SEC approval, we have companies that stocks trade there every day, and we have companies that are listed. So I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish. Yeah, thank you.
Well, we are looking forward to the next steps.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Eric Ries, o autor do Lean Startup, com a gente, e a gente segue por aqui no Rio Innovation Week. Tchau, tchau.